The morning sun cast long shadows across the Norfolk Naval Base as Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped out of the taxi. She wore her dress blues with quiet confidence, every ribbon and medal in perfect position. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes surveyed the imposing headquarters building before her. Sarah had been called to Norfolk for what her commanding officer described as a routine verification meeting. But she knew better. Nothing about this felt routine. The security guard at the main entrance barely glanced at her identification. "Conference Room C, 3rd floor," he said without looking up from his newspaper. His dismissive tone suggested he'd already made up his mind about her before she'd even spoken. Sarah made her way through the sterile corridors, her footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Other personnel she passed gave her curious looks. Some whispered to their colleagues after she walked by. She kept her expression neutral, but inside, a familiar knot of frustration was forming. Conference Room C was larger than she'd expected. A long oak table dominated the space, surrounded by 12 leather chairs. 6 men in various uniforms were already seated, their faces serious. At the head of the table sat Captain Morrison, a stern-faced officer with graying hair and cold blue eyes. "Lieutenant Chen," Morrison said without standing, "please, take a seat." Sarah sat in the empty chair facing the panel. She recognized most of the faces from their reputation, if not personally. These were serious men with serious careers, and they all looked skeptical. "Let's get right to the point," Morrison began, opening a thick file folder. "We've received some questions about your service record, specifically about your claim to have completed SEAL training and served with SEAL Team 6. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. "Sir, there's no claim involved. My service record speaks for itself." Commander Bradley, a heavy-set man with a permanent scowl, leaned forward. "Does it, though? Because we've done some checking. SEAL training records from your alleged graduation year are incomplete. The facility had a computer system failure that wiped out several months of data." "That's not uncommon, sir," Sarah replied evenly. "Military computer systems from that era weren't as reliable as today's." Major Williams, an Army officer whose presence here puzzled Sarah, consulted his notes. "You claim to have been part of Operation Neptune's Trident, but the official mission report lists only male personnel." "Many operations involved classified personnel whose names were omitted from standard reports for security reasons," Sarah said. "I'm sure you understand operational security requirements." Commander Bradley's scowl deepened. "Convenient, very convenient. Tell me, Lieutenant, what's the graduation rate for SEAL training?" "Approximately 15 to 20%, depending on the class." "And how many women have successfully completed SEAL training?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "As of my graduation, I was the first and only woman to complete the program." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Several of the officers exchanged glances that clearly said what they thought of her answer. Captain Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Lieutenant Chen, I've been in the Navy for 28 years. I've worked with SEALs, I've commanded SEAL operations, and I've never seen a woman who could meet the physical standards required. With respect, sir, you've never met me before today." Colonel Jackson, a Marine officer with numerous combat ribbons, spoke for the first time. "The physical requirements alone would be insurmountable. The average SEAL candidate can carry a fully loaded teammate over rough terrain for miles. Are you telling us you could carry a 200-pound man in full gear?" "Yes, sir, I could, and I have." "In combat situations?" Williams pressed. "In Afghanistan, during Operation Enduring Freedom. I carried Petty Officer Rodriguez 3 miles through enemy territory after he was wounded by an IED blast." Bradley consulted his files again. "We have no record of any Petty Officer Rodriguez being wounded in Afghanistan during your claimed service period." Sarah's hands remained folded calmly on the table, but her voice carried a slight edge. Rodriguez was his operational name. For obvious security reasons, I cannot reveal his actual identity without proper authorization. How convenient, Morrison said dryly. Every detail that could verify your story is either classified, missing, or involves people we can't identify. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Let's talk about SEAL training itself. Describe Hell Week. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. Hell Week begins on Sunday evening with breakout. 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. Cold water exposure, log PT, boat cruise, surf torture. The instructor's goal is to break you mentally before they break you physically. Anyone could read that in a book, Bradley interrupted. Sarah continued as if he hadn't spoken. The worst part isn't the cold or the pain. It's Wednesday night when your mind starts playing tricks on you. You'll see things that aren't there, hear voices. Some candidates hallucinate their mothers calling them to quit. The instructors know exactly when to apply pressure, when to offer rest, and when to push harder. Her voice took on a distant quality, as if she was remembering rather than reciting. On Thursday morning, they make you carry the boats to the beach in the dark. The sand feels like quicksand under your feet. Your muscles don't work right anymore. But you keep moving because stopping means quitting, and quitting means everything you've endured was for nothing. The room was quiet. Hayes nodded slowly. That's remarkably detailed. Anyone could memorize that from talking to actual SEALs, Morrison said, though he sounded less certain than before. Major Williams consulted another file. Your claimed unit, SEAL Team 6, is the Navy's premier counterterrorism unit. They handle the most sensitive operations. Are you seriously telling us that you, a woman, was trusted with that level of classified work? I'm telling you that I earned my position through the same training, testing, and evaluation as every other member of the team. Colonel Jackson leaned forward aggressively. Lady, I've seen the strongest Marines struggle with the physical demands of special operations. Women simply don't have the upper body strength or bone density required for extended combat operations. Sarah's eyes flashed, but her voice remained level. Colonel, with respect, your assumptions about women's capabilities might be based on limited exposure to exceptional individuals. Exceptional? Bradley laughed harshly. Is that what we're calling it now? Look, I'm sure you're a fine officer in whatever capacity you actually served. But this fantasy about being a Navy SEAL needs to stop. Captain Morrison closed the file folder with a sharp snap. Lieutenant Chen, we've indulged this long enough. Your story has more holes than Swiss cheese. We can't verify any of your claims through official channels, and frankly, the physical impossibility of your assertions makes this entire meeting a waste of time. Sarah stood slowly, her composure still intact despite the obvious hostility in the room. Gentlemen, I understand your skepticism. The Navy invested considerable resources in keeping my identity and service record compartmentalized for operational security. But my service was real, my training was real, and my deployments were real. Prove it, Morrison said flatly. I've provided everything I'm authorized to share. If you need additional verification, you'll need to contact Admiral Harrison's office. Commander Bradley almost choked on his coffee. Admiral Harrison? You're claiming Admiral Harrison can verify your story? I'm not claiming anything. I'm stating fact. Major Williams shuffled through his papers. Admiral Harrison is currently deployed to the Pacific Fleet. We can't exactly call him up for a chat about your alleged service record. Then I suggest you wait until he's available, Sarah said calmly. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. These officers were clearly frustrated by their inability to definitively disprove her claims, but they were equally convinced that she was somehow deceiving them. Lieutenant Commander Hayes tried a different approach. Lieutenant Chen, help us understand. If you truly are a Navy SEAL, why isn't this common knowledge? Why the secrecy? It would be tremendous for Navy recruitment and public relations. Sarah considered her answer carefully. The decision to keep my service classified wasn't mine to make. When you're operating in environments where capture by enemy forces could mean torture or death, sometimes anonymity is the only protection you have. That's a nice speech, Morrison said, but it doesn't change the facts. We've thoroughly reviewed your service record, and nothing supports your claims about SEAL training or special operations experience. Perhaps your review wasn't as thorough as you believe? The insult landed like a physical blow. Morrison's face reddened. Lieutenant, I strongly suggest you reconsider your attitude. Making false claims about military service is a serious offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Sarah met his angry gaze without flinching. Yes, sir, it is. Which is why I would never make such claims falsely. Colonel Jackson slammed his hand on the table. Enough of this charade. Young lady, you may have convinced some people with this story, but we're not buying it. Women have been trying to join special operations for years, and there's a good reason why they haven't succeeded. And what reason is that, Colonel? Biology, physics, reality. Take your pick. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her voice carried a steel edge. I see. So in your professional opinion, no woman could ever meet the standards required for special operations. That's exactly what I'm saying. Even if she exceeded those standards? Bradley laughed derisively. Exceed SEAL standards? That's rich. Lady, SEAL standards are designed to push the best male athletes to their absolute limits. The idea that any woman could not only meet but exceed them is fantasy. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I understand your position, Commander. You believe that because something hasn't been done publicly, it cannot be done at all. I believe in reality, Bradley shot back. Reality can be surprising, Sarah said quietly. Captain Morrison stood up, clearly ready to end the meeting. Lieutenant Chen, this panel's recommendation will be that your claims regarding SEAL training and service are unsubstantiated and likely false. We'll be forwarding our findings to your commanding officer for appropriate action. That is your prerogative, sir. You don't seem concerned, Hayes observed. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. I've learned that the truth has a way of revealing itself, sir. Often when you least expect it. Commander Bradley gathered his papers with obvious irritation. Well, the truth is that you're not a Navy SEAL. You never were a Navy SEAL. And this whole story is an insult to every man who's ever earned that designation. I see. Morrison checked his watch. This meeting is concluded. Lieutenant Chen, you're dismissed. Sarah came to attention and rendered a perfect salute. By your leave, sir. As she turned to go, Major Williams called out. Lieutenant Chen, for what it's worth, I almost believed you for a minute there. You should consider a career in fiction writing. Sarah paused at the door but didn't turn around. Thank you for the suggestion, Major, but I prefer nonfiction. She left the conference room with her head high and her shoulders square, leaving behind 6 men who were convinced they had just exposed a fraud. They began discussing their report immediately, their voices carrying the satisfaction of men who believed they had done their duty in protecting the integrity of the Navy's most elite unit. None of them noticed the quiet confidence in Sarah Chen's walk as she made her way down the corridor. None of them wondered why someone would risk their entire career on a lie that could be so easily disproven, and none of them thought to question whether their investigation had been as thorough as they believed. But they would. Very soon they would question everything they thought they knew about Lieutenant Sarah Chen, because the truth, as she had told them, has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. And Admiral Harrison was due back from the Pacific Fleet tomorrow. The Norfolk Officers Club buzzed with conversation as the evening shift change brought fresh faces into the dimly lit bar. Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat alone at a corner table, nursing a club soda and watching the news on the overhead television. The events of the morning's meeting replayed in her mind, but her expression remained calm. Word traveled fast on a naval base. By dinner time, half the base knew about the fake SEAL who had been exposed in Conference Room C. Sarah could feel the stares and hear the whispered comments from other tables, but she kept her attention focused on her drink. "Mind if I sit?" Sarah looked up to see Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres, a helicopter pilot with 20 years of service. Torres had a reputation for being direct and fair, qualities that had earned her respect across the base. "Please," Sarah said, gesturing to the empty chair. Torres sat down and signaled the bartender for a beer. "Hell of a day for you, I'm guessing." "I've had better." "Want to talk about it?" Sarah studied Torres's face, reading genuine curiosity rather than mockery. "What have you heard?" "That you claimed to be a Navy SEAL and got called out on it. Also heard you were pretty cool under pressure when they grilled you." "And what do you think?" Torres shrugged. "I think there's usually more to a story than the first version that gets passed around. I also think someone would have to be pretty stupid or pretty confident to make claims like that in a room full of senior officers." Sarah smiled slightly. "And you don't think I'm stupid? Your service record says you graduated top of your class from the Naval Academy. Stupid people don't usually manage that." Their conversation was interrupted by loud voices from the bar. Commander Bradley was holding court with several other officers from the morning's panel, his voice carrying across the room as alcohol loosened his tongue. "I'm telling you, it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," Bradley said, gesturing with his whiskey glass. "This little girl walks in there claiming she's a Navy SEAL. A SEAL! Can you believe it?" Lieutenant Commander Hayes, also present at the bar, looked uncomfortable with Bradley's volume and language. "Maybe we should keep it down, sir." "Why? Everyone's going to know soon enough. The Navy needs to take a hard line on this kind of fraud. Sets a bad example for real sailors." Sarah's grip on her glass tightened slightly, but her expression remained neutral. Torres noticed the reaction. "You don't have to sit here and listen to this," Torres said quietly. "Yes, I do. Part of being professional is maintaining composure regardless of provocation." Major Williams joined Bradley's group, already several drinks ahead of his colleagues. "What I want to know is how she got away with it for so long. Someone in the chain of command had to know she was lying." "Probably slept her way into those assignments," Bradley said with a nasty laugh. "It's the only way someone like that could end up where she claims to have been." The comment hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several nearby conversations stopped as other officers turned to look. Torres started to stand, anger flashing in her eyes, but Sarah caught her arm. "Don't! It's not worth it!" "The hell it isn't. He just revealed his character to everyone in this room. That's punishment enough." But Torres wasn't the only one who had heard the comment. Across the room, Master Chief Petty Officer Robert Kane was rising from his table. Kane was a legend on the base, a former SEAL instructor with 30 years of service and scars from 3 different wars. When Kane moved, people noticed. The big man walked slowly toward Bradley's group, his presence causing conversations to die down throughout the club. He stopped directly behind Bradley, who was still laughing at his own joke. "Commander Bradley?" Kane said in a voice that carried despite its quiet tone. Bradley turned, his smile fading when he saw who had addressed him. "Master Chief, what can I do for you?" "I was wondering if you'd repeat that last comment. Some of us didn't quite hear it clearly." The bar had gone completely silent. Bradley looked around nervously, suddenly aware that his joke had attracted unwanted attention. We were just discussing the events of this morning's meeting." "I see. And part of that discussion involved speculating about how a female officer might have received her assignments?" Bradley's face reddened. "Master Chief, I think there might be a misunderstanding." Kane's expression didn't change. "Oh, I understood perfectly. What I'm trying to figure out is whether you're brave enough to repeat it, or if you're the kind of officer who only talks tough when he thinks no one important is listening." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Bradley looked around for support from his colleagues, but Hayes had suddenly found his drink fascinating, and Williams was studying the floor. "Master Chief?" "I may have spoken out of turn," Bradley admitted reluctantly. "May have?" Kane's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Commander, in my 30 years of service, I've seen courage and I've seen cowardice. I've seen officers who lead by example and officers who tear down others to make themselves feel important. Which kind are you?" Before Bradley could answer, the front door of the club opened and 3 figures entered. The first was Commander Michael Rodriguez, the base's executive officer. Behind him walked 2 men in civilian clothes, who nonetheless carried themselves with unmistakable military bearing. Rodriguez scanned the room, his gaze settling on Sarah's table. He walked over with purposeful strides, the 2 civilians following close behind. "Lieutenant Chen," Rodriguez said formally, "I need you to come with me immediately." Sarah stood without hesitation. "Yes, sir." Torres looked concerned. "Is there a problem?" One of the civilians, a tall man with graying hair and intelligent eyes, answered, "No problem. We just need to borrow the lieutenant for a little while." As they moved toward the exit, Master Chief Kane intercepted their path. His eyes studied the 2 civilians with professional interest. "Gentlemen," Kane said with a respectful nod. The taller civilian returned the nod. "Master Chief, good to see you again." Kane's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sir, I didn't expect to see you back so soon." "Neither did I." "Circumstances change." Sarah watched this exchange with growing curiosity, but she kept her questions to herself as they left the club. Behind them, the bar erupted in whispered conversations as everyone tried to figure out who the mysterious civilians were and why they had come specifically for the woman everyone believed was a fraud. The group made their way to a black SUV parked outside the club. Rodriguez opened the rear door for Sarah. "Where are we going?" she asked. The taller civilian answered, "Somewhere we can have a private conversation without an audience." 20 minutes later, they were seated in a secure conference room in a building Sarah didn't recognize. The room was windowless and obviously designed for classified discussions. The 2 civilians had introduced themselves only as Agent Carter and Agent Sullivan from an unnamed federal agency. "Lieutenant Chen," Carter began, "we understand you had an interesting meeting this morning." "That's one way to put it, sir." "Tell us what happened." Sarah recounted the morning's events in detail, her training allowing her to recall conversations almost verbatim. The 2 agents listened without interruption, occasionally exchanging glances that suggested the information meant more to them than it would to a casual observer. When she finished, Sullivan leaned forward. "How did they react when you mentioned Admiral Harrison?" Commander Bradley seemed particularly surprised. He indicated that Admiral Harrison was deployed and unavailable for consultation. Carter smiled grimly. "Admiral Harrison has been back for 6 hours. He's currently meeting with the Secretary of the Navy about an urgent matter." "What kind of urgent matter?" Sarah asked. "The kind that involves a Navy SEAL whose identity has been compromised." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Sir, I can explain." Carter held up a hand. "Lieutenant, you're not in trouble. But we have a situation. Someone has been asking questions about you through unofficial channels. Someone who shouldn't know you exist." Sullivan opened a tablet and showed Sarah a series of photographs. "These pictures were taken yesterday at a cafe in Virginia Beach. Do you recognize the man in the center?" Sarah studied the image, her expression hardening. "Viktor Petrov. He was a Russian intelligence officer operating in Afghanistan during my last deployment." "Was?" "We assumed he was killed in a drone strike 6 months ago." Carter exchanged a look with Sullivan. "He wasn't. And yesterday he was asking very specific questions about a female American Special Operations soldier who might have been present during Operation Neptune's Trident." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. He's hunting for me. It appears so, which means someone leaked information about your involvement in classified operations. We're working to identify the source, but in the meantime, we need to manage the situation here. Sullivan consulted his notes. The panel this morning was convinced you were lying about your service record. That's actually good for operational security, but it creates other problems. What kind of problems? Carter answered. The kind where rumors spread and people start digging deeper to prove they were right. Pretty soon, someone might stumble onto information we can't afford to have public. So what do you want me to do? Tomorrow morning, Admiral Harrison is going to pay a visit to Norfolk Naval Base. He's going to request a meeting with the panel that questioned you today. And you're going to be there when he sets the record straight. Sarah considered this. Won't that compromise operational security even more? Not if we do it right, Sullivan said. Harrison is going to confirm that you are indeed a Navy SEAL, but he's also going to classify the details of your service under a national security directive. Anyone who talks about specifics will face serious consequences. And if Petrov is still hunting for me? Carter's expression grew cold. Then we're going to make sure he finds more than he bargained for. 2 hours later, Sarah was back in her quarters on base, but sleep didn't come easily. She stood at her window, looking out at the lights of the naval base and thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Master Chief Kane standing in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Master Chief, what can I do for you? Kane glanced around the empty hallway. Mind if I come in for a minute? There's something I need to ask you. Sarah stepped aside, and Kane entered her small quarters. He seemed to fill the space with his presence. Lieutenant, I've been thinking about what happened in the club tonight, about those men who came to get you. What about them? Kane studied her face carefully. I recognized one of them, Agent Carter. I worked with him on a joint task force operation 3 years ago. Very classified, very dangerous. Sarah kept her expression neutral. I see. The thing is, Agent Carter doesn't get involved in routine investigations. He only shows up when something is seriously wrong or seriously important. Master Chief, I'm not sure what you're asking me. Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, respectful in a way that suggested he was speaking to an equal rather than a subordinate officer. Lieutenant Chen, I've been a SEAL instructor for 15 years. I've trained over 1,000 candidates. And I've seen every kind of person who thinks they can make it through the program. Most of them are wrong. Sarah waited for him to continue. But every now and then, someone comes along who has that special something, not just physical strength or mental toughness, but a combination of skills and instincts that can't be taught. They either have it or they don't. Master Chief, this morning, when I heard what happened in that meeting, I thought it was just another publicity seeker trying to ride on the SEAL reputation. But tonight, watching how you handled yourself under pressure, seeing the kind of people who are suddenly interested in you, Kane met her eyes directly. Ma'am, I don't know exactly who you are or what you've done, but I'm starting to think those officers this morning made a serious mistake. Before Sarah could respond, Kane came to attention and rendered a perfect salute. Whatever happens tomorrow, you have my respect. After he left, Sarah stood alone in her quarters, realizing that the careful compartmentalization of her life was beginning to unravel. Tomorrow, Admiral Harrison would arrive, and the truth would finally come out. But she couldn't shake the feeling that other forces were already in motion. Forces that might not wait for official revelations. Outside her window, a black sedan with tinted windows slowly cruised past the officers' quarters, its occupants taking careful note of which rooms showed signs of occupancy late into the night. The hunt was beginning to close in from multiple directions, and Sarah Chen was right in the center of it all. The morning sun painted Norfolk Naval Base in shades of gold and gray as Admiral James Harrison's convoy approached the main gate. The three-vehicle escort moved with practiced efficiency, drawing attention from personnel who recognized the significance of an unscheduled flag officer visit. In Conference Room C, the same panel of officers who had questioned Sarah Chen 24 hours earlier waited with barely concealed nervousness. Captain Morrison checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes, while Commander Bradley straightened his uniform and tried to project confidence he didn't feel. "Remind me why we're here again?" Major Williams asked, though he already knew the answer. "Admiral Harrison requested this meeting to discuss yesterday's investigation into Lieutenant Chen's service record," Morrison replied tersely. "Apparently, he has information relevant to our findings." Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked troubled. "Sir, if Admiral Harrison is involved, maybe we should reconsider our conclusions. He's not someone who gets involved in routine matters." Bradley scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Hayes, we did our job. We investigated the claims and found them unsubstantiated. If Admiral Harrison has different information, he should have provided it through proper channels." The door opened, and Commander Rodriguez entered, followed by Lieutenant Sarah Chen. She wore her dress blues again, every detail perfect. But there was something different about her bearing this morning, a quiet alertness that suggested she was preparing for something significant. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez announced, "Admiral Harrison will be with you shortly. He's currently in a classified briefing with the base commander." Sarah took the same seat she had occupied yesterday, facing the panel. The officers studied her with renewed curiosity, wondering what could possibly warrant an admiral's personal involvement in what they considered a straightforward case of false claims. 20 minutes later, the door opened again, and Admiral James Harrison entered. Every officer in the room snapped to attention. Harrison was a legend in the Navy, 58 years old, with silver hair and steel-gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His uniform displayed an impressive array of ribbons and decorations, including several that most officers couldn't immediately identify. "Gentlemen, please be seated," Harrison said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came from decades of command. He moved to the head of the table but remained standing, his gaze sweeping across each member of the panel before settling on Sarah. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "Captain Morrison, I understand your panel conducted an investigation into Lieutenant Chen's service record yesterday." "Yes, sir. We found significant discrepancies and inconsistencies in her claims about SEAL training and Special Operations Service." "I see. And what was the basis for these findings?" Morrison consulted his notes. "Sir, we were unable to verify her training records due to alleged computer system failures. We found no documentation supporting her claimed participation in classified operations. And frankly, sir, the physical impossibility of her assertions made the entire matter suspect." Admiral Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "Physical impossibility. That's an interesting phrase, Captain. Tell me, what makes you certain that Lieutenant Chen could not have completed SEAL training?" Commander Bradley leaned forward eagerly. "Admiral, with all due respect, SEAL training is designed to push the best male athletes to their absolute limits, the physical standards alone." "Commander Bradley," Harrison interrupted quietly, "in your experience, what percentage of SEAL candidates successfully complete the program?" "Approximately 15 to 20%, sir." "And in your opinion, what separates those who succeed from those who fail?" Bradley looked confused by the direction of the questioning. "Mental toughness, sir. Physical conditioning. The ability to push beyond normal human limitations." "Interesting. And you believe these qualities are exclusive to male candidates?" "Sir, I believe in biological reality. Women simply don't possess the upper body strength and bone density required for the demands of special operations." Harrison's expression remained neutral. "I see. Lieutenant Chen, would you mind standing and removing your dress blue jacket?" The request caught everyone off guard. Sarah stood without hesitation and carefully removed her jacket, folding it precisely and placing it on her chair. Underneath, she wore the regulation white uniform shirt with lieutenant's bars on her collar. "Now, Lieutenant, would you please roll up your left sleeve?" Sarah complied, rolling her sleeve up to reveal her forearm. The skin was pale but clearly showed the definition of someone who maintained excellent physical condition. "Higher, please. To the shoulder." As Sarah rolled her sleeve higher, something became visible on her upper arm, the edge of what appeared to be a tattoo. She hesitated for just a moment, then continued rolling the sleeve until the entire design was visible. The reaction in the room was immediate and dramatic. Master Chief Kane, who had been quietly standing near the door, straightened as if he'd been struck by lightning. Commander Bradley's eyes widened in shock. Lieutenant Commander Hayes leaned forward, studying the tattoo with growing amazement. The tattoo was unlike anything a casual observer might expect. It wasn't decorative or artistic. Instead, it was a precise, military-style marking that combined several elements. A seal trident, but not the standard version displayed on uniforms. This one was rendered in black ink with small, almost microscopic additions that spoke to someone with deep knowledge of SEAL culture and tradition. Beneath the trident were numbers, coordinates, but not random ones. Any SEAL would recognize them immediately as the location of a specific operation that had never been made public. And woven around the entire design was a thin red line with small marks along its length, marks that corresponded to confirmed enemy kills in combat operations. But it was the small symbol at the base of the tattoo that made Admiral Harrison smile for the first time since entering the room. It was a tiny eagle with outstretched wings, and below it, in letters so small they were barely visible, were the initials TF-145, Task Force 145. A unit so classified that its very existence was known to fewer than 50 people in the entire United States government. "Thank you, Lieutenant. You may roll down your sleeve." The room was dead silent as Sarah adjusted her uniform. Every officer present was trying to process what they had just seen, and most of them were failing to understand the significance. Admiral Harrison turned to address the panel. "Gentlemen, I'm going to share some information with you that is classified at the highest levels. Everything you hear in this room is subject to national security restrictions, and any unauthorized disclosure will result in immediate court-martial and federal prosecution." Captain Morrison found his voice. "Sir, what exactly are we looking at?" "You are looking at the service record of one of the most decorated special operations soldiers in U.S. military history. Lieutenant Chen didn't just complete SEAL training. She graduated first in her class with the highest scores ever recorded in the program's history." Commander Bradley's face had gone pale. "Sir, that's impossible. No woman has ever—" "Commander Bradley," Harrison's voice carried a sharp edge, "I'm going to stop you right there. Your assumptions about what women can and cannot accomplish are not only wrong, they're dangerous. Lieutenant Chen's achievements are not matters of opinion or debate. They are documented facts classified at levels you don't have access to." Harrison moved to stand behind Sarah's chair. "Lieutenant Chen volunteered for an experimental program in 2019. The program was designed to test whether exceptional individuals, regardless of gender, could be integrated into special operations units without compromising operational effectiveness." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "The program was so successful that it remains classified to this day. Lieutenant Chen not only met every standard required of her male counterparts, she exceeded them in most categories." Major Williams finally found his voice. "Sir, if this is true, why was her service record incomplete? Why couldn't we verify any of her claims?" "Because, Major, her very existence represents a strategic advantage that our enemies would pay millions to neutralize. Every record of her training and operations has been compartmentalized and classified beyond normal access levels." Admiral Harrison walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "What you gentlemen discovered yesterday was exactly what was intended. Her cover story was designed to be questionable, to discourage casual investigation while protecting the truth. He turned back to face the panel. Unfortunately, recent events have compromised that security. Foreign intelligence services have become aware that an American female special operations soldier exists, and they are actively hunting for her identity. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. These officers had spent the past day dismissing and mocking someone who represented one of their nation's most closely guarded secrets. Lieutenant Commander Hayes spoke hesitantly. "Admiral, the tattoo we just saw, what does it signify?" Harrison looked at Sarah, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "The coordinates mark the location where Lieutenant Chen single-handedly eliminated a terrorist cell that was planning an attack on American civilians. The operation was conducted in complete darkness, in hostile territory, with no backup support." He pointed to where the tattoo had been visible. The red line marks confirmed enemy combatants neutralized in the line of duty. 17 enemy soldiers eliminated across 4 deployments in Afghanistan and Syria. Commander Bradley looked sick. "Sir, we had no way of knowing—" "Commander, you had every way of knowing. You chose to rely on assumptions and prejudices rather than conducting a thorough investigation." Master Chief Kane stepped forward. "Admiral Harrison, sir. May I speak?" "Of course, Master Chief." Kane came to attention. "Sir, I served as a SEAL instructor for 15 years. I trained thousands of candidates, and I thought I knew the limits of human potential." He turned to look at Sarah. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology, and my respect." Sarah stood and faced Kane. "Master Chief, you showed me respect last night when others were showing ridicule. That meant more than you know." Admiral Harrison observed this exchange with approval. "Master Chief Kane, how would you assess Lieutenant Chen's qualifications for SEAL operations?" Kane's response was immediate and definitive. "Sir, based on what I've learned today, Lieutenant Chen represents the absolute pinnacle of special operations capability. Any commander would be honored to have her on their team." Harrison nodded. "Which brings us to the current situation. Lieutenant Chen's cover has been compromised by foreign agents who are actively seeking her identity. As of this morning, she is being reassigned to a new unit with enhanced security protocols." Captain Morrison looked confused. "Sir, what unit would that be?" "That information is classified above your clearance level, Captain. What I can tell you is that Lieutenant Chen will be leaving Norfolk immediately, and her service record here will be sealed permanently." Harrison moved to stand in front of the panel. "Gentlemen, you will not discuss what you've learned in this room with anyone. You will not speculate about Lieutenant Chen's new assignment or current location, and you will not attempt to research or verify any of the information I've shared with you today." Commander Bradley, who had been silent since seeing the tattoo, finally spoke. "Admiral, sir, I owe Lieutenant Chen a personal apology. My behavior yesterday was inexcusable." Sarah looked at him steadily. "Commander, you reacted based on the information available to you. I understand the position you were in." "No, ma'am. I reacted based on prejudice and ignorance. There's a difference." Harrison checked his watch. "Lieutenant Chen, your transport will be here in 30 minutes. I suggest you use that time to collect your personal effects." Sarah came to attention. "Yes, sir." As she prepared to leave, Master Chief Kane approached her. "Lieutenant, there's something I need to know. Yesterday, in the club, when Commander Bradley made that inappropriate comment, why didn't you defend yourself?" Sarah considered the question. "Master Chief, responding to insults with anger only proves that the insults have power over you. The truth doesn't need to be defended with emotion. It just needs to be revealed at the right time." Kane nodded slowly. "That's wisdom beyond your years, ma'am." Admiral Harrison escorted Sarah to the door. As they reached the threshold, he spoke quietly so only she could hear. "Sarah, your new assignment is going to be challenging. You'll be working with an international task force tracking the same people who have been hunting you." "Sir, are we talking about active pursuit operations?" "We're talking about eliminating a threat to national security. Viktor Petrov and his network have made it personal by targeting you. Now we're going to make it personal for them." Sarah's eyes hardened with professional determination. "I understand, sir." "I know you do. That's why you were chosen for this assignment." Harrison extended his hand. "It's been an honor serving with you, Lieutenant. Give them hell." As Sarah left Conference Room C for the final time, the panel of officers sat in stunned silence. Everything they had believed about human potential, about the limits of training and determination, had been challenged and destroyed in the space of one conversation. Captain Morrison was the first to speak. "Gentlemen, I think we owe ourselves a lesson in humility." Commander Bradley nodded heavily. "Sir, I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. That woman is extraordinary." "She's a hero," Lieutenant Commander Hayes said quietly, "and we treated her like a fraud." Master Chief Kane, still standing by the door where Sarah had exited, spoke with quiet conviction. "No, gentlemen. We met a legend today. Lieutenant Chen represents everything the Navy stands for: excellence, determination, and courage under fire." Outside the building, Sarah Chen climbed into a black SUV that would take her to her next assignment. As they drove away from Norfolk Naval Base, she reflected on the events of the past 2 days. The truth had indeed revealed itself, just as she had predicted. But the real mission was just beginning. In a safe house 3 miles away, Viktor Petrov studied surveillance photographs and intercepted communications. His hunt for the American female operative had brought him closer than ever to his target. He didn't yet know her name or her exact location, but he was confident that within days he would have both. He was wrong. By the time the sun set that evening, Lieutenant Sarah Chen had disappeared into the shadow world of international special operations, carrying with her skills and secrets that would soon make Viktor Petrov's hunt the last mistake he would ever make. The woman they had thought was faking SEAL credentials was about to show the world what a real Navy SEAL could accomplish when the mission became personal.